Well, they got to do it for Kyle Tucker, don't they? Kyle Tucker, previously untouchable many years ago, and now very touchable. The Cubs got their grubby mitts all over him. We'll save that for the baseball podcast. But Texans versus the Dolphins. Texans favored by 3, but a lot of big concerns going into this game, and we'll get into all of it. And really, I'll go through 5 matchups, the general position versus position matchups that are really going to matter in this game. The big guys to know on the Dolphins' defensive line are 2 guys where you're going to say, really? Because one of them is Calais Campbell, and I know you know the name, but he's 38 years old. He's the damn Tim Duncan of defensive tackles, and he's still out. He's still one of the best defensive tackles in the league. He's not going to play 70 snaps a game, but he makes a big impact. And then Sealer, the big old white boy they got in there, he's been playing really well. He's got 6 or 7 sacks on the year. He's rushed very well. The interior defensive line versus the Texans offensive line that, frankly, been a little bit of a headache, sometimes literally, for the Texans. So what are they going to do at left guard? If you haven't seen my video on Zach Thomas that I did with Drew Hodgson, I encourage you to look at that. I think there's some potential there. If Zach Thomas, who's been on the Texans team for a couple of weeks now, gets a chance. If it's Kendrick Green, I don't know, but that is by far my biggest concern in terms of things that can really hurt the offense. Any of that immediate pressure up the middle or late pressure in the form of a Tavondre Sweat, Calais Campbell could totally do that. Calais Campbell's been doing Tavondre Sweat stuff for years, for decades, probably since Tavondre Sweat was 5 years old. He's been doing that stuff. How has the pressure affected CJ? The national media and a lot of the film watchers have been annoyingly mute on CJ Stroud, and I think it's because the performance has been such a setback statistically from what everybody was predicting in the offseason, but the Texans aren't right up there relevant in terms of, the huge name teams that are competing for Super Bowls. The Texans just haven't scratched the surface of that ceiling yet. But Greg Cassell, guy from NFL Films that I respect a lot, he was on Ross Tucker's football podcast, the Ross Tucker football podcast earlier this week. This is what he had to say about CJ Stroud.
Yeah, and I think, it's funny. We all like C.J. Stroud. That's not the point. But, every player can continue to improve, particularly quarterbacks, because he's only in his 2nd season. And clearly their offensive line this season was not as good as it was in his rookie season when he was very, very comfortable in the pocket. But that becomes the next step in a quarterback's development, particularly a quarterback who at his core is a pocket passer. You have to learn how to play when everything is not pristine. Because as you know, Ross, you played offensive line. Not every week is the offensive line going to give quarterbacks just a totally clean, secure pocket. It's the NFL. The players you're playing against on the defensive line with the blitz schemes that exist now in the league, they're so multiple and they're so advanced. Quarterbacks have to learn how to function in noisy, muddied pockets when the pocket is squeezed. And I think that's one of the next steps in his development. It's easy to watch on TV and say, oh, it's a bad O-line, he's under pressure. You know what? That happens in the NFL. You now have to learn how to play when the pocket is squeezed. And I think he'll get there, but I think this year has been a learning experience in that regard.
I think, and what Greg said is true. All quarterbacks go through it. And we've seen different quarterbacks through the years. From Aaron Rodgers went through a stretch in his career, even after he'd been really good, where when he didn't have good offensive line play, he really, really struggled. He wasn't the same guy. We've seen Pat Mahomes have struggles with it at times, and he's, gotten to the point now where, well, this year aside, he had to learn some things about it. It's just hard on a game-by-game basis to go in and figure out when the pass protection is as bad as it's been. And it's not like CJ is Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is responsible for a lot of his sacks. CJ isn't responsible for a lot of his sacks by normal quarterback measuring standards. But so you get into, all right, in this game situation, should he have gotten rid of the ball quicker, or is he not trusting when he does get rid of the ball quicker, is he not trusting the pass protection to get there? And the clock in his head, it's got to be recalibrated every week because he just can't trust that interior offensive line. I'll take an example of a guy that was well into his career, Tom Brady. And Tom Brady, the year the Texans put up a good fight against him in the playoffs, the Brock Osweiler year, the Texans were messing with Brady with pressure right up the gut. And all quarterbacks hate that, especially, as Cassell said, C.J. Stroud ultimately is a pocket passer. He can scramble some, but that's not his calling card. It's really, really hard, no matter who you are, whether you're an old Tom Brady or a young C.J. Stroud. And to separate it all out, kind of separate the signal from the noise of, okay, when can we blame the offensive line? When can we blame the quarterback? It's really, really hard. It's that CJ is continuing to still make some really positive plays under pressure. It doesn't look like he's rattled or incapable of doing it. It's just a matter of all of it fitting together. And really over these last 4 weeks, man, whether it's Zach Thomas or whomever else playing left guard, maybe a revitalized Kenyon Green, maybe that part of it kind of gets smoothed out a little bit. It would help a lot if they weren't in 2nd and 10 and 3rd and 15 so often, because that doubles the pressure on CJ Stroud. I'm not distraught over CJ or anything at this point, but they face, this week a defense that has really good interior defensive linemen, very good ends, especially if Chubb comes back. We don't know, how much we'll see of Chubb, if at all, but they've got potential to cause problems. I'm okay. I feel good about the pass protection at the tackles for the most part. It's all about what's up there in the interior. The other big, by the way, Game Time, thank you for sponsoring this. If you use the promo code XDeal, if you're looking to go to the game this weekend, if you're looking to hop on the Rockets bandwagon, which I highly suggest, go to Game Time. You can get $20 off with your first purchase when you use the promo code XDeal. Do it now. If there's one thing I've learned from trying to buy airline tickets over the last couple weeks, these prices don't go down as the event approaches. So it's like a shock to me at the age 49 that airline tickets get really, really expensive around the holidays, and I'm a procrastinator. Jalen Ramsay versus Nico Collins. Jalen Ramsay, much like Derek Stingley has done the last 4 weeks, he will travel with the team's best wide receiver. The best wide receiver for the Texans right now is very much Nico Collins, and the question becomes, all right, you're facing a defense run by Anthony Weaver, former Texans player and coach, who does a lot of cool misdirection stuff, a lot of movement and games up front, which the Texans have struggled with as an offensive line at times. What I'm hoping is that the one thing Bobby Slowick has been good at is scheming in the first half. He knows how to ambush a team, especially with Nico Collins. So I'm expecting at least one deep shot out of Nico Collins through a combination of Nico being Nico, and whether he's on Kendall Fuller or Jalen Ramsay, scheming up a way to get a deep shot to him. Hope, whether it's earlier in the game or late, I would prefer it in the fourth quarter, personally. We just haven't really demonstrated an ability to do that so far. But you're going to see a lot of matchups between those two because Ramsay does travel. So he doesn't talk as much smack as he used to, unfortunately. Or at least if he does, it's kind of into a vacuum because, people aren't paying that much attention to the Dolphins right now. But he's still a very good player. Can the pass pro hold up long enough for a deep shot to Nico Collins or somebody else? That's the really big question this week. The Texans linebackers, third matchup, Texans linebackers and safeties versus Jonnu Smith and Achane. So Achane has not been running the ball well. He's been averaging about 3 yards per carry over the last few weeks. And we'll get to the offensive line issues for the Dolphins later as well. It's a lot of stress. I mean, D'Amico doesn't usually divulge much about game plans or anything. He speaks in generalities. He flat out said, hey, man, the safeties and the linebackers, they got to be on point this week mentally because this Dolphins offense with Mike McDaniel and Tua's ability to get rid of the ball quickly with their RPOs and everything else like that puts a lot of stress on the linebackers. You'd love to have a really smart and savvy veteran like Azeez Al-Shire back there, but unfortunately, the league has decided to villainize him for a football hit. It's neither here nor there. Just a perfectly clean football hit, IMO. But, Christian Harris is huge. And I'm at a point now where I don't know how much faith, or I don't know how much I want to even allow myself to hope for Christian Harris to be out there and play 60 snaps and be incredible, because I think they're going to take it easy on him. I think they're going to ramp it up with an injury like he had, which is a very Kyle Tucker-like injury, where it's just seemed minor, turned into major, went on far longer than we wanted to, and nobody had any information about anything. So if he can play 50% of the snaps and be out there on third down, on second and long, all of those, his athleticism is going to be really big. I'm glad that Achane hasn't been running the ball well, because when it comes to the play action and the RPOs, it's a lot easier for the linebackers versus a team that you can game plan it and drill it into their heads. Hey, we're not as concerned about the run. Make your reads, but keep your depth. You saw the Texans do that when they had to play with a bunch of linebacker replacements versus the Colts in the final regular season game last year. And they did a good job with it. The Colts ended up running for a bunch of yardage, but it's almost like that Giants game plan from the 1990 Super Bowl when they said, all right, look, we'll let Thurman Thomas run. We just don't want to get gashed through the air. You got to kind of have like a minimized version of that, I think, and you can still probably do well versus the run, but they gotta be on point in the middle of the field. The safeties picking up Jonnu Smith on crossers, linebackers jamming the receivers, Waddle and Tyreek Hill. But ideally, and I'll go to the last matchup, the defensive ends versus the offensive tackles for the Dolphins. So ideally, you get a 4-man pass rush going. The Dolphins are going to get the ball out really quickly, so it doesn't mean you're going to get a bunch of sacks or anything, but it allows you to play zone behind it. And that's what you need in this game. You need your cornerbacks who are great in man coverage. This game, you want them to be in zone as much as possible to come up and make plays at the catch in that kill zone. Just get up there and punish guys for catching stuff up over the middle. Allow everybody to swarm. And the yardage after the catch is what you're worried about with the Dolphins. The Dolphins on the year are in the top 5 for yards after the catch. So that's with a long stretch of bad quarterback play without Tua Tagovailoa. You've seen Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, who don't have their typical numbers. They've both had 100-yard games or 99-plus yard games in the last few weeks since Tua returned. So you're starting to see more classic versions of those guys. But on 2 counts, one, when they get their catches, which they will, Tua averages 73% completion, you got to get to the ball. You got to rally to the ball. You got to tackle, and you just flat out have to be there. You can't make mental errors and glitches like we've seen. That Tennessee game looms large, where you've got a combination of Toa not picking the guy up out of the backfield, and then the safeties and all the defensive backs through a combination of poor alignment, poor anticipation, and frankly, poor effort. We've seen some big plays let up. This just can't be the week. So they've got fresh legs. I just need them to be at the ultimate swarm level. But the yards after the catch for the Dolphins have been a strong suit. The Texans have missed a lot of tackles. They're in the top 5 for missed tackles. For yards after the catch, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I think they're lower in the league in that regard on a per-catch basis. Don't quote me on that. Also, to correct myself from something I said this morning, against running backs as receivers, I got the stats flip-flopped in my head. The Texans are really good against running backs as receivers, as long as and there have been games where they'll let some seepage out on screens and wheel routes and things, but they generally correct it pretty quickly. Then they swarm and they get some nice tackles for losses on screens. That's big this week. So getting to the matchup that I was going to talk about like 4 minutes ago. Tron Armstead, as of right now, somebody tell me if I've missed an update or not. Tron Armstead, good chance he's not going to play. So it's going to be Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson versus Houston native Patrick Paul, the rookie or second-year player, whatever he is, and Kendall Lamb, our old friend Kendall Lamb, who's he's carved out a nice career for himself. I get excited and happy whenever I see, oh yeah, you know what, good for Kendall Lamb. It's been like 5 or 6 years since he left the Texans, and he's been a starter in a few places. He's been starting for the Dolphins, and I think he's doing an adequate job. But the Texans have an advantage there with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. The defensive ends going against this scheme have to be just as disciplined in the linebackers. So Will's got to know when to be hell-bent for leather and then when to dial it back and play a little bit more conservatively. I think Danielle's got a real good knack for that. I trust that they're going to win those matchups. You're probably, because Tua gets rid of the ball really quickly, it doesn't mean there's going to be a boatload of sacks, but you want to make it as uncomfortable as possible. So I'm predicting Texans 26-23. I have to allow for either Waddle or Tyreek Hill to have at least one breakout big play, because that's kind of who the Texans are as a defense right now. They've allowed the most 30-plus yard plays. They're in the top 5 or 6. I think they're 6th in 30-plus yard plays allowed. and some of them seem to come at very inopportune moments, like in the Tennessee game. But I think that's going to be offset by a big strike by Nico Collins, and then the Nico Collins production in general. It's really a lot this week, as it has been throughout the year. It's a lot about the offensive line. Seth Payne, biggest Texans fan. Woolens go. I don't know if Woolens is a. I'm not up on the kid speak, man. I don't know if that's a typo or some word that I don't know. I feel like this win will be the easiest. The Texans are dangerous. We're close to beating Detroit. Nobody give them Hill like Texans. Greenway. Okay. Exactly. Patrick Paul returns to this. Who are the returns? Patrick Paul, Mike McDaniel, who was fired by Gary Kubiak. Revenge tour. Mike McDaniel will tell you very openly that he deserved to get fired. He had a bit of an alcohol issue back in the day. This isn't me like divulging secret information or anything. He had a little bit of an alcohol issue. He was just burning the candle at both ends when he was here with the Houstons. I'm burning the candle at both ends with the Texans. And Gary Kubiak had to let him go. But Mike McDaniel obviously has rebounded, hasn't touched a drop of alcohol in a long time. But so there, Anthony Weaver, Mike McDaniel, Kendall Lamb. I feel like I'm missing somebody. And then a whole lot of common ties because of Mike McDaniel. I'm sure there's assistant coaches that I'm leaving out or something. But Weaver, Weaver was very good as a player for the Texans, but it was before they turned around and got good. But then as a defensive coordinator, he was stuck in limbo in that 2020 year. Hold on a second. Sorry, buddy. Sorry, Brandon. Don't mean to get rid of you there. But remember, go to Game Time. Use the promo code XDEAL for $20 off your first purchase. My God. Do it. Do it today. If you Weaver was in that 2020 season where, remember, they got destroyed in the playoffs by the Chiefs. The Chiefs ran out of gunpowder for their fireworks and cannon shots in that playoff game. And the Texans decided to fix that by letting go of DJ Reader, letting go of a defensive back whose name eludes me right now, and doing nothing to bolster the defense that year. So, and then it was the weird 2020 year where, between the combination of COVID, Bill O'Brien, Jack Easterby, everything else that went with it, it wasn't going to be the year that Weaver had his best showing as a defensive coordinator. I think that defense has gotten better and better, the Dolphins defense, as the years gone by. And this will be an interesting one against Weaver. Love Greg Cassell if you're missing it. We played Greg Cassell earlier, who talked about CJ handling pressure. He says this is CJ's time to learn how to play differently. And I think he has made progress in taking the easy money. That's the advice that Tua gave CJ when he saw him in the offseason. It was like, man, take the easy stuff. Take the easy stuff. That's the advice Tom Brady would give CJ Stroud, or has given CJ Stroud. Take the easy stuff. Take the easy stuff. Take the easy stuff. Some of the easy stuff, I get psychologically from where CJ is. This is the really hard thing. And I'm not making excuses for him. It's such a muddled mess offensively. And I don't know if I've ever seen a team where Joe Mixon is playing so well. He's got so many 100-yard games. And yet, even in those games where he gets 100 yards, maybe not up until the Jacksonville game, have I felt like, oh, okay, that's the run game I want to see. And in the Jacksonville game, it went the way it goes with some really good rushing teams, where in the first half it wasn't working. They figured out what was going to work, and, running off tackle to Laramie Tunsil's side with Cade Stover blocking, that worked out really well. It takes time for it to click. And then in the second half, you saw, oh, okay, they're getting steady yardage. They're getting 4, 5, 6 yards at a clip. And Mixon was able to have a nice stat line, but it wasn't because of a bunch of run stuffs and then an 80-yard run in which he, created it all on his own. That's the kind of run game you want to see. The Dolphins' run defense, I think, is better than where it looks on the overall stats. I think they're middle of the road on a lot of the run defense stats. Their defensive line, they've got some full-grown men on their defensive line. The other area of opportunity that, again, it was kind of surprising to me that D'Amico pointed this out because he doesn't usually divulge anything like this, but he just flat out said, we got to attack the middle of the field. We got to attack their linebackers. And if that means that Bobby Slowick all of a sudden starts hitting a bunch of crossers and everything, if we start seeing a really good quick game or screens, like screens to people other than Nico Collins, I'll take that as a good sign. What can you take from this game? We went into the Titans game, and I said going into that game, look, the Titans have been a bad football team, but they present specific challenges that really could exploit the Texans' weaknesses, specifically the defensive tackles versus the interior offensive line. The Texans lost that battle, and they, because they couldn't win the physical matchups on the offensive line, and you got the result that you get. The Dolphins are a better team than the Titans, but I think they present some of those same challenges, some of those same problems. From Bobby Slowick's perspective, look, yeah, attack the middle of the field, please. Can I just see some concepts? Can I see some rubs? Can I see something, some mesh, anything that looks like, oh wow, we're attacking the middle of the field, we're hitting them where it hurts, and that falls back on CJ as well. Let's see. I wonder what could have made the league do that. The Amy Brad. Let's see. Seth. I've gotten behind. Got to hit so hard that nothing feels easy. There you go. I like that. Armstead listed as doubtful. Yep, and he has been. I don't think he's going to play. I just don't want to. I don't want to be surprised by a Tron Armstead all of a sudden. Yeah, the Petrie loss. So as far as Petrie and how it affects him, because we've already seen Jimmy Ward come down and play the star position. I think he's perfectly suited and capable. His weaknesses and strengths are very, very similar to Jalen Petrie's. If you see Jalen Petrie or Jimmy Ward lined up in the slot with single high or zero coverage versus Devontae Adams, or like as it was with Jalen in the Jets game, or if it's Jimmy Ward versus Tyreek Hill, I would advise against that. That's not their forte. These guys are closer to being linebackers than they are cornerbacks. But as far as making an impact, creating turnovers, all of that, yes. The problem comes in that now that Jimmy Ward's playing that position, you have to rely on Eric Murray and Kalen Bullock, who's been awesome as a rookie, but he's not a veteran safety yet. The ability of those guys to erase mistakes in front of them isn't the same as when you've got veteran safety. Well, Eric Murray's a veteran safety, but he's just not the same guy as other safeties that could be in there. Kalen Bullock, I think, has made up for some of his youthfulness with just impact plays. So likewise, just as Jimmy Ward makes up for some of his physical limitations when he's down there playing the slot corner with impact plays, that's what Kalen Bullock's been able to do. They've just got to be really smart and not be biting on double moves, not be biting on the eye candy that takes the safety's eyes over to the right, and then all of a sudden, oh, crap, actually they went left. That's the kind of stuff that I'm worried about this week. But should be a good one, man. I'm excited. I'm excited about the environment. I like that the offensive line is playing at home because they tend to do better with that. I'm excited to see. I'm genuinely excited to see whoever they roll out there at left guard. I'm intrigued by Zachary Thomas. If you haven't seen that video, go watch it. I did one yesterday with Drew Hodgson, former Texans offensive lineman. But there's and then if maybe Kenyon Green is a different guy somehow. Maybe just through sitting out a few weeks, getting his shoulder healed, and then having Jarrett Patterson making the calls, having more clarity on the offensive line. If Kenyon plays, maybe we'll see that. But I'm excited to watch it because honestly, that's the key to a lot of the rest of the season is can they handle stuff on the interior offensive line. So please, if you haven't already, please hit the like button. The algorithm tends to like that. Subscribe if you found yourself here a few times. Just go ahead and subscribe. It's easy. It's free. All you have to do is listen to Game Time ads every now and then, and where I tell you that you can get $20 off with your first purchase when you use the promo code XDeal. So you're going to the game, go to Game Time right now. Plug in the code XDeal. You can take a look at the stadium, look around, see which, you get the first-person view from whichever seat you're sitting in. They'll show you what the best deals are. You get all-in pricing, all those things. They try to remove all the doubt and confusion from it. So go to Game Time, and I'll see you guys probably tomorrow. I'll be probably doing a bunch of shorts tomorrow because, again, the algorithm, stupid algorithm.